How does a Christmas gift that my own daughter called trash end up selling for $100,000 at a public auction? Why did that sale not only change my bank account, but also my entire family's future? This is how a simple painting showed everyone exactly what my respect was worth. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Brent Hayes, and I am 52 years old. Most people who meet me think I am just a quiet man with a small sketchbook and a simple life. They see the worn jacket, the old car, and the hands that have more ink stains than jewelry. They do not see the hours alone at a desk, the pages of drawings that never reach stores, or the shelves where my older work sits in folders with forgotten dates on the spine. They also do not see how much of my heart I put into one simple painting I gave my daughter last Christmas. I work as a freelance illustrator and do some small jobs for publishers and local businesses. Years ago, I drew comic stories for small companies. It never turned me into a star, but it did give me a style, a way of telling stories in lines and color. When my daughter was little, she loved it. She would sit beside me and watch me draw and say that one day the whole world would know my name. Time moves, people grow, and the same art that once made her proud now makes her a little uncomfortable. Her name is Chloe. She is 26, married to a man named Ethan Bennett, and lives in a world with bright white walls, clean lines, and new photos for social media every week. The painting started the day her daughter was born, my granddaughter, Zoey. That morning I came home from the hospital, put a fresh canvas on my easel, and started to mix colors. I did not know exactly what I was painting at first. It began as a simple city skyline at dusk, then turned into something else, something softer. Lines curved around each other like arms holding a child. There were deep blues, warm golds, and a thin red line crossing near the center like a path. It took months to finish. I worked on it between freelance jobs, late at night, adding small details, wiping out others, letting layers dry, and then painting over them. To me, the painting became a story about family. There were shadows for the years I raised Chloe by myself after her mother left. There were bright spots for the times she laughed and called me her hero. There was one small shape hidden in the lower corner that looked like a stroller beside a park bench. I thought she might smile if she found it. I told myself that this year, instead of buying something from a store that anyone could pick, I would give her a piece of myself, something I made with my own hands. I believed that would mean more than anything. Chloe and Ethan invited me to their house for Christmas Eve. Their place is in a new neighborhood with big glass windows and wide driveways. He calls it open concept, and she likes to say it is perfect for photos. I wrapped the painting myself. I never liked glitter paper, so I chose simple brown wrapping and tied it with red ribbon. It looked old-fashioned compared to the glossy bags I saw in store displays, but it felt honest. When I carried it down to my car that afternoon, the winter air bit my face, and my breath came out in small clouds above the canvas. The drive to their house took about 40 minutes. I spent most of it thinking about how Chloe used to react to my work. As a teenager, she hung my prints on her bedroom wall and told her friends that her dad was an artist. When she started dating Ethan, she slowly took some of them down. She said she was changing her style. Later, when I visited her new apartment with Ethan, there were framed posters from online stores instead of my pages. She told me she just wanted something more modern. I did not argue. I do not like fights. I simply told myself that people grow out of things, even of their parents' art. Their house shone with lights when I pulled up to the curb. Small white bulbs lined the roof. A large wreath hung on the front door. Through the windows I saw warm yellow light and people moving around in holiday sweaters. I took a deep breath, lifted the painting from the back seat, and walked up the path. My boots made soft crunching sounds on the gravel. Inside, music played in the background, and people talked over each other in relaxed, confident voices. Chloe met me at the door, kissed my cheek quickly, and told me I was right on time. Ethan appeared behind her with a drink in his hand and a wide smile. He looked past the wrapping in my arms and asked in a cheerful voice if I had brought one of my famous panels. I smiled and said it was something special for Chloe and Zoey. He laughed in that friendly way some people have when they think they are making a harmless joke. He said he could not wait to see it, and that everyone loved unique things in this house. The living room looked like a holiday magazine page. A tall tree stood in the corner, covered in white and silver ornaments. Under it there were boxes and bags from brands I recognized even from a distance. Shiny logos, careful ribbons, perfectly folded tissue paper. I placed my gift near the back, propped gently against the trunk. The brown paper and red ribbon looked small and plain next to all the brightness. For a moment I felt a little out of place, like an extra step in a smooth staircase. More guests arrived. Ethan's parents, Victor and Sandra, and a few of their close friends. Victor shook my hand and gave me a strong pat on the shoulder. He told me it was good to see me and asked about work in a casual tone, like he was asking about the weather. When I said I was still freelancing and doing illustration work, he nodded politely and changed the subject to Ethan's latest business progress. Sandra kissed both my cheeks and mentioned how busy they had been, then turned her attention to Zoe's small red dress and matching shoes. We had dinner first, a long table full of dishes I did not recognize, arranged like artwork. There was pleasant talk, stories about travel and deals and future plans. Now and then, Chloe asked me to hold Zoey while she took a photo with someone. Zoey leaned into me, small and warm, and pressed one sticky hand against the front of my shirt. I whispered to her that I had made something just for her and her mother. She looked up, not really understanding, but smiled anyway. After dessert, someone suggested that it was time to open gifts. Everyone moved back into the living room. The lights around the tree glowed softly, and the room filled with that special kind of excitement that always surrounds wrapped boxes. Ethan took the role of handing things out. He picked up each gift, read the tag, and passed it to the right person, making jokes as he went. There were designer scarves, watches, new phones, pieces of jewelry, and a fancy stroller for Zoey from Victor and Sandra. Every time someone unwrapped something expensive, there were approving sounds and comments about taste and quality. My gift stayed near the back, pressed between two large boxes with bold letters on the side. I watched it the whole time. It seemed smaller each minute. Finally, only a few presents remained, and Ethan reached for the brown paper package. He read the tag and announced that it was from me to Chloe. He sounded amused when he said it was handmade, probably, and he passed it across the circle to her. Chloe sat on the rug, Zoey in her lap. She tore the paper off quickly, in that rushed way adults do when they are used to gifts. The wrapping fell away, and the painting came into view, the deep blues and golds, the curves and hidden shapes. For a second, she did not say anything. The room fell a little quieter, as if everyone leaned in together. Ethan looked over her shoulder. Victor adjusted his glasses. A younger cousin lifted a phone, holding it low, the camera lens pointed right at us. Then the comments started. Chloe frowned and said she did not really get it. She said it felt kind of heavy, like something you would see in a dark hallway instead of a baby's room. Ethan said it was very old school and asked in a light tone if it was supposed to be sad. Sandra observed that their house was going for a very clean and bright style, and that strong colors like that might not fit the vibe. Someone near the tree laughed and said it looked like something from a secondhand store. Another voice called it basically trash. A small group chuckled. The cousin with the phone hid a smile behind his hand as he kept recording. I sat on the edge of the armchair with my hands linked together. My heart felt tight in my chest. Not like a sharp pain, more like someone had slowly closed a door and I was on the other side. I watched my daughter hold the painting like an object that had arrived by mistake. I waited for her to soften, to say she did not mean it, that she still appreciated the work behind it. Instead, she told the room that she did not know where she would even put something like that. She added that they had just paid a designer to plan the walls, and she did not want to confuse the style. I could hear my own voice when I answered her, calm but thin. I said that it was all right, and if they truly did not like it, I could take it back. I said I wanted them to enjoy their space and not feel pressured to hang something. Ethan nodded, as if I had made a smart choice, and suggested they might find a storage spot for it in the garage until they figured something out. The words were light, not openly cruel, but the meaning wrapped tight around each one. For a moment, I looked at my granddaughter. Zoey was busy with a ribbon, dragging it along the carpet and watching it curl. She did not know what any of this meant. She did not know that the large shape in the lower corner of the canvas was a small echo of her stroller in the park. To her, color was just color. Maybe that was a kinder way to see the world. The evening continued after that. More gifts were opened. People talked and laughed and shared plans for the new year. I did my best to join the conversation where I could. I helped clear plates, held Zoey when Chloe's hands were full, and thanked Victor and Sandra for the meal. All the while, the painting rested against the wall, half hidden behind a stack of opened boxes and torn paper. Every time I glanced at it, it seemed a little farther away. When it was finally time for me to leave, I put on my coat and stepped back into the living room. The tree lights were dimmer now. Some people had moved to the kitchen for late coffee. I looked at the painting one more time and asked Chloe in a quiet voice if she wanted me to take it with me until they had a place for it. She shrugged and said that might be better for now. Her tone was practical, as if we were talking about a spare chair. Ethan was busy showing Victor something on his phone and barely looked up. I picked up the canvas and carried it out to the front hall. No one stopped me. No one said they were sorry. Outside, the air was colder than before. I walked down the path with the painting held close to my side. The wreath on the door moved slightly in the wind behind me, and the lights along the roof flickered in the corner of my eye. At my car, I opened the back door and laid the painting gently on the seat, face up. In the window's reflection, I saw an older man in a worn coat and a plain scarf, standing next to a house that looked like a showroom. I sat in the driver's seat but did not start the engine right away. My hands rested on the steering wheel. The world outside the windshield felt far away, like a scene in one of the panels I used to draw. Somewhere inside the house, people were laughing again. Music rose and fell. A shape moved past the upstairs window. For a short moment, I wondered if I had completely misjudged everything, if I should have just bought a gift card or a gadget and kept the painting for myself. Then my phone buzzed in the cup holder. The screen lit up the dark interior of the car. There was a new message from an unknown number. I picked it up and saw a photo of my painting, taken earlier that evening. The colors looked sharper under the camera flash. Under the image, the text was simple, just a short line asking if the painting was for sale. The message sat on my screen, bright in the dark car. A stranger had sent a clear photo of my painting from inside Chloe's living room. Under it, there were only a few words, asking if the piece was for sale. For a while, I just stared at it. Part of me thought it might be a joke from one of the younger guests. Maybe they wanted to keep the Christmas mood going by teasing the older man with the old-fashioned gift. I did not answer right away. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, then I locked the phone and put it back in the cup holder. I started the engine and pulled away from the curb. The lights of the Bennett house shrank in the rearview mirror. My painting lay face up on the back seat, the colors catching small flashes from passing street lamps. The roads were quiet. The town seemed softer at night, with shop signs off and only a few cars at the intersections. My small rented townhouse is on the edge of the city, near a row of older shops and a bus stop. The building is nothing special from the outside. Brown bricks, narrow windows, a small patch of grass that never looks quite green, but inside it is mine. The walls hold my shelves, my boxes of drafts, my rows of sketchbooks. The living room smells faintly of paper and coffee. I carried the painting in first and leaned it against the wall in my studio corner. The studio is really half of the living room. One side has a simple sofa and a small television. The other side has a large wooden desk, a set of drawers, an easel, and more art supplies than normal people think they need. Brushes in old jars, ink bottles, piles of reference books and comic collections, a lamp with a long arm that I like to bend directly over the page. I turned on the lamp and looked at the painting. Under the cool, focused light, the colors looked deeper than they had at Chloe's house. The lines that seemed strange against their white walls seemed natural here. For a moment I felt a sting behind my eyes, but it passed. I had lived through enough quiet disappointments to know that feelings can be folded and put away like paper. I sat down at my desk and opened my old laptop. Before I did anything else, I connected my phone and copied the photo and the message to a folder. Habit. I keep records of almost everything that touches my work. Old contracts, print orders, emails from editors, even short notes from readers who liked a drawing. I did not know yet if this message would matter, but I saved it anyway. After that, I made tea and sat on the sofa. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the heater. My thoughts went back to when Chloe used to sit where the painting was now. When she was a child, my life was simple and hard at the same time. Her mother left when Chloe was 7. It was not a loud event. There were no broken plates or shouting matches. There was just a packed bag, a short note on the kitchen table, and a front door that stayed closed behind her. I remember holding Chloe in my lap that night while she cried into my shirt. I told her that I was still there, that we would be all right. I believed it because I had to. Back then, I was drawing comics for a small publisher, working late nights to meet deadlines. There was a chance, around that time, to move to a bigger city and join a larger studio. It would have meant more money, more prestige, and less time at home. A part of me wanted that badly. Another part imagined Chloe alone in a new school with a father who was always away. In the end, I stayed. I took on extra illustration jobs instead, advertisements, educational materials, anything that brought in enough to cover rent and food. Chloe did not know about the choice. Children rarely know the full list of quiet decisions their parents make. What she did know was that her room slowly filled with art. I made prints of my favorite pages, framed them, and hung them above her bed. She loved them. She would point to them when her friends came over and say that her dad drew those characters. She told me once that I was a real artist and that one day my work would be in stores everywhere. We went to small comic conventions together. I would sit behind a folding table with stacks of books and a handwritten sign. She would help me arrange things, take cash, and hand out business cards. She liked wearing a badge that said assistant. People would stop and talk to us. Some had read my work, some were just curious. I remember one collector who told her, not me, that her father's line work was special. She looked so proud that my chest felt too full for a moment. Time moved. Chloe grew up. high school, college, a first job, and a busy office. Right after college, she started posting lifestyle content online. At first, it was just simple photos and short posts. Then brands began to contact her. They sent products, small gifts, sometimes money for sponsored posts. She built an audience who liked her style: bright clothes, clean spaces, pretty arrangements. My drawings did not fit that world very well. She met Ethan at a marketing event, or at least that is how she told the story. He started his own tech company young, with help from his father, Victor. They liked talking about growth and reach and the future. When she brought him over to my place for the first time, I had my pages spread out on the table, as usual. He looked around with polite interest and said that my work was very retro and that it made the place feel like an old studio. Chloe laughed and said she had grown up in a cartoon and now wanted a different style. Later, when she moved into a new apartment with Ethan, I helped her carry boxes up the stairs. She put a few of my framed prints in the hallway. A month later, when I visited again, they were gone. On the walls, there were new posters from popular design shops. Chloe told me in a gentle voice that she was trying something more modern and that my pieces were safe at my place. She did not mean to hurt me, I think. She just wanted to match Ethan's world. I tried not to take it personally. I told myself that this was normal. Children make their own lives, parents become background. Still, with each small change, a little more distance grew between us. My phone buzzed on the sofa beside me and pulled me back to the present. I looked at the screen again. The unknown number waited there with the same question. This time, I answered. I wrote that yes, the painting was mine, and asked how they had gotten the photo. The reply came quickly. The person said they had received the image in a private group chat after the Christmas party. They said a younger guest had shared it as a joke, calling it a strange piece from a relative. My chest tightened a little at that, but I kept reading. The sender wrote that, joke or not, they liked the painting. They asked if I was the Brent Hayes who had drawn a small series of comics years ago. I blinked at the screen. That was not the kind of question I expected. I wrote that yes, that was me. There was a pause. Then another message appeared. The person introduced themselves as Nadia. She said she curated a gallery and pop art space downtown and had followed my early work in the past. She asked if I would be open to meeting for coffee to talk about the painting and my other pieces. I set the phone down slowly. The room seemed quieter than before. Nadia Rossi. I remembered the name from years ago. We had met at a small event, both much younger then. She was full of plans and energy. I was just trying to meet deadlines. We had stayed in loose contact for a while, then life pulled us in different directions. To see her name again now, after the night I had just had, felt strange, like a door from an old hallway had swung open on its own. I told her I would think about it and asked when she was free. She suggested the following week at a cafe near the gallery. I said that might work and that I would confirm the time later. After we ended the conversation, I saved her number and leaned back on the sofa. My body was tired, but my mind was very awake. The days between Christmas and New Year always feel blurred. That week, I did some small jobs for clients and tried not to think too much about the party. Still, moments kept returning in my mind. Chloe's frown, Ethan's light jokes, the small laugh from someone near the tree when they called my work trash. I tried to push them away and focus on the tasks in front of me. One afternoon, I ran a children's drawing workshop at the community center. It was nothing fancy. A group of kids sat around a long table, and I showed them how to build simple characters from basic shapes. Circles, squares, lines for movement. Their faces lit up as their figures came to life on the paper. At the end, one of the parents came over to thank me and said their child had never been this focused on one thing for an entire hour. Another parent asked if I had books for sale. Moments like that reminded me that my work did mean something to people, even if it did not match an online trend. A couple of days later, I met Chloe and Zoey at the city park. It was a clear, cold afternoon. The sky looked like a flat sheet of pale blue paper. Chloe had called to ask if I could take Zoey for a walk while she answered some work emails on a bench. When I arrived, Zoey ran to me in her small coat, arms out, already reaching for the sketchbook she knew I always carried. I lifted her up and felt her weight settle into my arms. Chloe looked tired, with dark marks under her eyes. She greeted me quickly, handed me a small bag with snacks, and sat on a bench with her phone. I pushed the stroller along the path and let Zoey walk beside me when we got to the playground. I drew quick little animals and figures on a notepad, and she clapped when I turned the page toward her. After a while, Chloe joined us. She said she was sorry about the Christmas confusion, and that they had not meant to be harsh. She explained that the house had a very particular look now, and that strong, emotional pieces like mine made the space feel heavy. She said that maybe one day, when they had a bigger home, they could give my work a corner somewhere. I listened and nodded. I told her I understood that people change their style. I also mentioned, carefully, that someone had asked about the painting after the party. She seemed surprised for a second, then amused. She said it was probably someone making fun of it in another group chat. She warned me, in a light voice, not to get my hopes up about a random text. She added that the art world was tough and that people like to talk more than they like to buy. I did not tell her the sender's name. I did not say that Nadia already had a gallery. I simply said we would see. Then I bent down to pick up Zoe's hat from the ground, where she had dropped it on purpose just to watch me reach for it. Chloe went back to her phone. That night, at home, I sat at my desk and went through old portfolios. I pulled out pieces I had almost forgotten, cover concepts that never went to print, personal works I made between jobs, little experiments with color and form. I spread them out on the floor and tried to see them with new eyes, as someone like Nadia might see them. I was in the middle of sorting them into piles when my phone buzzed on the desk. I picked it up, expecting a message from a client. Instead, a small window appeared at the top of the screen. It was a calendar reminder. I looked closer. The reminder said, "Coffee with Nadia. Gallery." The date was set for the following day, at 10 in the morning. I had put it there after our first exchange and then pushed it to the back of my mind. Now the words glowed on the screen, simple and clear. For a long moment, I just stood there, holding the phone, the floor around me covered with years of work that almost no one in my family took seriously. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. Light came through the thin curtains in my bedroom, pale and soft. For a moment, I forgot about the calendar reminder, the painting, and the message from the unknown number. Then it all came back in one slow wave. I made coffee and stood at the kitchen counter while it cooled. The house was quiet except for the small sounds of the city outside. A bus passed. Somewhere a dog barked once and then stopped. On the fridge, a magnet held up a paper Zoey had scribbled on during one of her visits. It was all loops and circles, but I had written her name at the bottom like a title. At 9:30, I put on a clean shirt, my better jacket, and wrapped my scarf around my neck. I took one last look at the painting in the studio corner. It leaned there calmly, as if it did not know it had almost been left in a stranger's garage. I whispered to it that we were going out, then locked the door behind me. The cafe Nadia had chosen was near the center of town, close to the gallery district. It was a narrow place with tall windows and small wooden tables. People sat with laptops and notebooks, cups beside them, faces turned toward screens. The air smelled like roasted coffee and fresh bread. I arrived a little early and picked a table near the window. My hands felt restless, so I took out my small sketchbook and started to draw the outlines of chairs and cups. It calmed me. A few minutes later, the door opened and someone called my name. When I looked up, I saw her. Nadia had a few more lines at the corners of her eyes than the last time I remembered her, but the same sharp, curious look. She smiled as she walked over and said it had been far too long. I stood and we shook hands. Her grip was warm and firm. We ordered coffee and sat down. At first we talked about simple things, the weather, how fast time moves, old names from the convention days. Then she took out her phone, opened a photo, and turned the screen toward me. It was my painting, the same picture from the party, but now cropped carefully and brightened. Under it there was just my name. She said that when she saw the image in the chat, she recognized my style at once. She remembered a small series I had done years ago, how she had wanted to work with me back then, but the timing had not worked. She said she had always wondered what happened to my work. I told her I kept drawing, mostly for smaller jobs, and that my personal pieces just stayed with me. I said that the painting was meant as a gift for Chloe, and that it had not gone as I hoped. Nadia's expression grew serious. She said she was sorry to hear that. She added that sometimes the people closest to us are the last ones to see what we do clearly. She asked some careful questions about my life now, where I lived, what kind of jobs I took, whether I still had older original pages from my comic days. I told her about the boxes in my studio, about the folders with dates on the spine. She nodded with interest. Then she told me about her work. She spoke about the gallery, about how the market for illustration and comic-inspired art had changed in the last decade. She said there was now a strong interest in artists who blended narrative and abstract elements, especially if their work had a story behind it. As she said this, she tapped the photo of my painting with one finger. She asked if I would consider letting her show the piece at an upcoming auction she was curating at the Regional Art Center. It was a winter event that gathered collectors, many of whom looked specifically for pieces with personal history. She explained that the price could not be promised, but the audience would be serious and the setting respectful. I felt my chest tighten again, but this time the feeling was different. It was not pain, it was something sharper, like sudden focus. I told her I had not planned for anything like that, but that I trusted her judgment. I added, in a low voice, that the story behind the painting might not flatter my family. She said that was my choice to share or not, but that the piece already had power on its own. We talked about practical things then. She explained how consignment worked, how the gallery would take a percentage if the sale went through, how my name and a short description would appear in the catalog. She said there would be a deadline for submitting high-quality photos and basic information such as title, size, and medium. I listened and took mental notes. Before we parted, she looked me in the eye and said she genuinely believed the painting could attract strong interest. She told me not to underestimate the value of years of practice just because some people close to me did not see it. I did not know what to say to that, so I just thanked her. We agreed that I would send her photos and details soon if I decided to move forward. As I walked out of the cafe, the winter air felt colder on my face, but my mind felt strangely clear. I had arrived feeling like a man who had brought a failed gift. I walked away feeling like I might be holding something I had never fully measured. That weekend, Chloe invited me again to the Bennett house. This time it was for a casual dinner, not a full holiday event. She said they were keeping it simple, just close family. I hesitated before saying yes. Part of me wanted to avoid the house altogether. Another part thought it might be good to spend time with Zoey. In the end, Zoey won. When I arrived, the decorations were lighter than on Christmas Eve, but the house still looked like a catalog. The tree remained in the corner, now with fewer gifts at its base. Victor and Sandra were in the kitchen with Ethan, talking about some new showroom project. They all greeted me with practiced warmth. We sat down to eat. The conversation flowed around business, upcoming trips, and new products Chloe would promote online. I listened, adding a few comments where I could. At one point, Victor asked me if the freelance world was still keeping the lights on. The tone was light, but the words had a weight behind them. I said it was fine, that I had enough steady clients. Chloe asked about the children's workshop at the community center. She said it sounded cute and that I was good with kids. Ethan joked that maybe one day we could turn my drawings into a brand for Zoey's age group. He said it like a generous idea, but there was something in his voice that made it sound like a charity project. I decided gently to change the direction. I mentioned that I had met an old friend from my early comic days. I said she now ran a gallery and had shown interest in the painting they had seen at Christmas. I kept my tone neutral, as if it was just something that had happened, nothing more. There was a small pause at the table. Then Ethan laughed. He said it was funny that the painting had found an admirer through a group chat joke. He asked if my friend was serious or just being polite. Chloe smiled and said that if the gallery wanted to hang it somewhere in a corner, that was better than it gathering dust. She added, with a small shrug, that at least someone liked it. Victor said that sometimes art circles like to act excited about anything unusual, that it did not always mean real interest. He told me not to get carried away, that the art world could be a tricky place for someone without strong backing. Sandra nodded and said that no one wanted to see me disappointed. I sat there and listened to all of it. On the surface, their words sounded like advice, like concern. Underneath, I heard something else. I heard the assumption that I was fragile, that I could not understand my own field, that I should be grateful for any attention given to me. In that moment, something inside me shifted. It was not loud. I did not slam my hands on the table or raise my voice. Instead, it felt like a line on a page that had always been faint suddenly became dark and clear. I saw the pattern that had built up over the years, the way my work had been quietly pushed out of sight, the way my choices had been reduced to small jokes, the way my role had been framed as a harmless older man they could guide and protect. I thought of the nights I sat alone at my desk while Chloe slept in the next room. I thought of the jobs I had turned down. I thought of the time I had spent building a small safety net for her, setting aside parts of each paycheck into accounts and plans. I had done all of that because I loved her and wanted her future to feel safe. I had never seen it as a trade. Now, listening to her and Ethan talk about my painting like a strange toy, I realized that love did not always return as respect. Zoey dropped a spoon on the floor, and I bent down to pick it up. Under the table, hidden from their eyes, I let out a slow breath. When I sat back up, my face was calm. I decided, quietly, that I would stop waiting for them to value what I did. I would let other systems speak instead. Systems they trusted, like markets and contracts and institutions. The rest of the dinner passed in small waves of talk. When I left, I hugged Zoey, thanked Chloe for the meal, and shook Ethan's hand. On the drive home, the road felt a little different beneath the tires. Not physically, of course, just in the way I noticed it. The streetlights passed in regular intervals, each one drawing a circle of light that faded behind me as I moved forward. Back in my townhouse, I went straight to the studio corner. The painting waited there, patient. I turned on the lamp and looked at it closely. Then I walked to the closet in the hallway and pulled out a plain metal box from the top shelf. It was not heavy, but I always treated it with care. Inside the box were documents and envelopes I had been adding to for years. Copies of my will, notes about insurance, old contracts from publishers, a few letters I had written but never sent. On top of the stack lay a small flash drive in a clear plastic case. I had labeled it Estate in neat handwriting. I opened the case and set the drive next to the box on the desk. Then I plugged it into my laptop. One by one, I began to save things that I knew might matter later. The photo of the painting from the party, the messages that had followed, a few short clips from past events where people had made small jokes about my work. I had not thought much about them when they happened, but now they seemed like pieces of a larger picture. When I finished, I safely removed the drive and put it back into its case. I placed the case in the box, then closed the lid and slid the box back into the closet. No one else knew it was there, and I did not plan to talk about it yet. I was not ready for confrontation. I was only preparing, the way a careful artist prepares layers on a canvas before anyone sees the final color. Before going to bed, I walked over to the small calendar hanging near the kitchen. Each month had a simple drawing I had made for myself. I flipped to the new page and found the date Nadia had mentioned for the winter auction. I took a red pen from the counter and circled that day in a firm line. The circle glowed faintly in the low kitchen light. I turned off the lights and went to my bedroom. The house sank into darkness, but my mind stayed alert. I lay there listening to the small sounds of the heater, the distant passing of a car, the creak of the building settling. I felt strange, both tired and awake at the same time. Just as my eyes began to close, my phone lit up on the nightstand. I reached for it and saw a new message from Nadia. She wrote that the auction date was fixed, that she believed my painting would fit the theme, and that if I agreed, she needed high-quality photos and a title by the end of the week. The next day, I read Nadia's message again while I ate breakfast. The words about the auction did not look real yet. They sat on the screen as calmly as a grocery reminder. I washed my plate, set it in the rack, and then went to the studio corner. The painting waited on its stand. I had looked at it so many times that I could trace every line with my eyes closed. Still, this time felt different. If I sent it out into the world, it would no longer belong only to me and the walls of my small home. Strangers would see it. People would judge it without knowing my history. That thought scared me for a moment. Then I remembered how Chloe and Ethan had judged it with all my history right in front of them. Somehow the idea of unknown eyes felt kinder. I spent the morning preparing the painting for photography. I cleaned a few specks of dust from the surface, checked the edges of the frame, and placed it against a neutral wall near the window where the light was soft. I set up my old camera on a tripod and took several shots from different distances and angles. I moved slowly, checking the focus and the way the colors came through on the small screen. When I was satisfied, I transferred the images to my laptop. On the larger screen, the painting looked crisp and clear. The deep blues rolled into each other like quiet waves. The gold accents held their shape. The small stroller-like mark in the corner was visible, but not obvious. It felt like a secret detail only careful viewers would find. Nadia also needed a title. I stared at the empty line in the email draft for a long time. I did not want to use something heavy or bitter. The painting had been born from love, not from the scene in the Bennett living room. After a while, I wrote Pathways at Dusk and let the letters sit there. It seemed simple, but the word pathways reminded me of all the choices and quiet steps that had shaped my life. When I read it out loud, it felt right. I attached the photos, wrote the title, added the dimensions and medium, and hit send. The email left the outbox with a soft whoosh. That small sound made my heart race more than I expected. After that, I walked into the kitchen and made tea. As I waited for the water to boil, I thought about the next steps. The auction was one path. There was another path I had been avoiding for a long time. The papers in my metal box, the plans I had made years ago for what would happen to my little collection of savings and rights when I was gone. I had written my first will after Chloe turned 18. It was simple then. Everything to her. I had updated it over the years as my work and finances changed. A few years ago, after some health scares in our extended family, my lawyer, Harold, had suggested I add clearer terms to the trust I planned for Chloe and any future grandchildren. At the time, I did not like thinking about that too much, but I agreed. We put in general language about respect and care, more symbolic than strict in my mind. Now, that language started to feel less abstract. I sent Harold a short email asking for an appointment to review my estate plan and discuss some questions about gifts and ownership. He replied within an hour, offering a slot 2 days later. I accepted, then printed out his address just out of habit, even though I knew the way. The next 2 days were busy with normal tasks. I finished a logo for a small business, sent sketches to a magazine, and ran another kids' workshop at the community center. Life did not stop just because something important was forming in the background. That contrast felt strange. The same coffee, the same bus passing outside, with a new path quietly opening under my feet. On the morning of the meeting, I took the metal box from the closet and placed it on the table. I added the flash drive with recent files, a small notebook with financial notes, and a printed photo of the painting for context. Then I packed everything into a plain canvas bag and left the house. Harold's office was on the 5th floor of an older office building downtown. The lobby had marble floors and a faint echo when people walked through. In the elevator, I looked at my reflection in the metal walls. I saw a man with graying hair and a soft-lined face, holding a worn bag like it contained something delicate. It did. Harold greeted me in his usual calm way. He had kind eyes behind simple glasses and a tidy desk that always held the same neat stacks of files. We sat across from each other, and he asked how I was. I answered truthfully. I said I was mostly fine, but that some things had happened in my family that made me want to review my plans. He listened as I told him about the Christmas party, the painting, and the way Chloe and Ethan had reacted. I did not add extra drama. I simply said what they had said and how they had treated the gift. Then I mentioned Nadia, the gallery, and the possibility of the auction. Harold folded his hands and nodded as I spoke. When I finished, he sat quietly for a moment, thinking. Then he asked me one clear question. What did I want to protect? I had not fully formed the answer until that moment. The words came out slowly. I said I wanted to protect Zoey's future, my work, and my own sense of dignity. I said I did not want my daughter to control things she did not respect, especially if she saw them only as a way to lift her own image. I added that I still loved her, but that love did not mean I had to let her treat my legacy like clutter. Harold leaned back and opened a drawer. He took out a folder with my name on it and looked through a few pages. He reminded me of the trust structure we had set up, how certain assets would move to Chloe, how others would be held for future grandchildren. He pointed to a section I vaguely remembered, where we had included a general condition about responsible behavior and basic respect, mostly as a guiding idea at the time. He explained in careful terms that while emotional hurt alone did not change legal documents, clear patterns of public disrespect tied to property or gifts could be considered when adjusting a trust. He said that no one could force me to leave my work or funds to a person who openly rejected and mocked what they stood for. He also noted that, since the painting had been refused in front of others, there was a strong argument that ownership had stayed with me. He asked if there was any record of what had happened. I told him about the video from the party, about the group chat where they called the painting trash and joked about my garage art, and about the fact that one of those jokes had led Nadia to find the piece. He raised his eyebrows slightly at that last part. Then he said that, if I wished, we could collect and store those records, not to start a conflict now, but to have a clear picture later. I took the flash drive out of my bag and placed it on the desk. I told him it held copies of the video, the messages, and some notes. He slid it toward him and said he would add it to my file and keep it safe. Then we talked briefly about possible future changes to the trust, not in detail, just in general direction. He suggested that after the auction, when we knew more, we could meet again and review everything. Before I left, I asked him plainly if it was wrong to feel the way I did, to want to change things. He shook his head and said that it was natural for plans to change when relationships changed. He told me that I had been generous until now and that I still was, but that generosity could include setting clear boundaries. On my way out, I passed the building's small waiting area. A young couple sat there with a baby stroller. The baby waved a tiny hand in the air. I thought of Zoey and felt a quiet firmness settle in my chest. From Harold's office, I walked a few blocks to Nadia's gallery. She had asked me to stop by if I had time, to look at the space and talk about the auction in person. The gallery front was clean and simple, with large windows showing a few pieces on the main wall. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paint and wood. Nadia greeted me with a quick hug. She led me through the main exhibition area to a small office in the back. On one wall hung a planning board with notes and printed images pinned in clusters. She pointed to a square in the center where my painting's photo was pinned with the title, Pathways at Dusk, underneath. There were lines drawn from it to other works, creating a web of themes. She explained how the auction night would work. There would be a preview where guests could walk around and view the pieces, then everyone would move to the hall where the actual bidding would happen. My painting, she said, would be part of a central section focused on pieces about family and memory. She said that, depending on how the catalog came together, there might be a short paragraph about the artist's background. She asked how much I wanted to share. I thought about Chloe and Ethan, about the way they valued status symbols and public events. I realized that if this auction went well, they would likely hear about it sooner or later, especially if any of their circle attended. For now, I kept my answer simple. I told Nadia she could mention my years in illustration and comics, my role as a teacher and workshop leader, but that the full family story could wait until later. She nodded and said that was fine. She showed me a draft layout for the catalog pages. Thumbnail images, names, short texts. It was still in progress, names written in pencil, blank spaces waiting to be filled. My entry was there in light handwriting, not yet typed. Seeing my name in that list was like seeing it printed in faint ink on the edge of a future. Before I left, she placed a hand on my arm and said that I should prepare myself, not for disappointment, but for possibility. She said that sometimes collectors attach themselves to a piece in a way that surprised everyone, even the curator. She did not promise anything, she just asked me to remain open to what might happen. Later that evening, back in my kitchen, I spread a few printed pages on the table. These were screenshots from the family group chat and a few emails where Chloe had pushed aside my offers to help decorate with my art. The words looked almost harmless in isolation, just jokes and small comments. But together, they formed a pattern. I placed each page in a transparent sleeve and then into a simple folder. I labeled the folder with the date in small letters. I did not do it with anger. I did it with the same care I used when putting together a portfolio for a client. Clear, organized, ready if needed. The house grew quiet as the night went on. I washed my cup, turned off the kitchen light, and went to the studio corner one more time. The painting stood there, unchanged on the surface, but its path was no longer the same. Soon it would leave, hang on a new wall, and stand under bright lights in front of strangers. I was in bed, half asleep, when my laptop made a soft sound from the desk in the other room. I almost ignored it. Then curiosity pulled me up. I shuffled into the living room and opened the screen. There, in my inbox, was a new message from Nadia's gallery with a subject line that said, "Winter Auction, Catalog Preview." I clicked it, and a PDF opened. As I scrolled through the pages, full of names and images, my eyes stopped when I saw it. My painting, my name, and a printed estimate beside it that made my breath catch for a second. When I saw the estimate in the catalog preview, I read the number twice to make sure I was not imagining it. The line beside my name and Pathways at Dusk suggested a range that already felt higher than anything I had ever been paid for one piece. It was only an estimate, just ink on a digital page, but it showed me how the gallery saw the painting. Not as a hobby piece from a quiet man in a townhouse, but as work that belonged in a serious room among other serious works. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen in the half-dark. The glow from the laptop lit the studio corner where the real painting stood. On the PDF, it was only a rectangle on a page. In my home, it was a weight of canvas and wood and hours. The two versions now had a path between them, and that path led through the auction hall. In the days that followed, I tried to keep my routine steady. I finished commissions, answered emails, and kept my workshops running. But under everything, there was a low, steady hum of thought. I found myself planning more carefully than usual, not just about the auction, but about what might come after. Harold sent me a message asking if I wanted to meet again before the auction. He said it could be useful to put certain decisions in place in advance, just in case the sale changed the shape of my estate. I agreed. We set the meeting for the week before the event. On the morning of the appointment, I woke feeling oddly calm. The sky was gray outside my window, and a thin rain made soft patterns on the glass. I made coffee, checked my notebook, and placed the folder of printed messages and notes back into the canvas bag, along with the latest draft papers Harold had sent for review. His office felt familiar by now. The receptionist greeted me by name and led me in. Harold rose from behind his desk with the same measured smile. We shook hands and sat. He placed a few pages between us, the top one with my name printed in clean, dark letters. He explained, in clear and simple terms, what we would adjust. He talked about how certain assets would be redirected if specific conditions were met, how the trust for Zoey would function with professional management, how Chloe's role would change. He did not read every line out loud, but he gave me the shape and purpose of each part. As he spoke, I listened more to the structure than to the individual words. The details were there, but what mattered to me was the idea behind them, that I was allowed to decide what happened to the things I had built and saved. I was allowed to say that respect mattered as much as blood. I was allowed to separate my love for my daughter from her control over my work and funds. Harold asked if I had any questions. I asked him one thing, whether these changes would punish Chloe or simply protect what needed protection. He thought for a moment, then answered that the law did not work like a scolding parent. It worked like a set of doors and locks. I was choosing which doors would lead to which rooms. People could still come close if they wanted to, but they would not automatically have keys to everything. That answer felt right. I took the pen he offered. My hand did not shake. I signed where he indicated, slowly and clearly. He added his own signatures where needed and told me he would file the documents and keep the originals safe. He reminded me that I could still change plans in the future, but that this version now reflected what I had described today. When I left the office, the rain had lightened to a fine mist. The city looked washed and quiet. On the sidewalk, people hurried by with umbrellas. I walked without one, my jacket slowly darkening with small spots. I felt strangely steady, as if I had finally placed a heavy object on a solid shelf after carrying it in my arms for too long. Back home, I stood for a long time in front of the painting. I traced the shape of the hidden stroller with my eyes. It reminded me again of Zoey and of the kind of world I wanted for her. A world where she might grow up knowing that her grandfather cared enough to think ahead, both with his art and with his plans. Soon it was time to tell Chloe about the auction. I had not yet invited them to the event. I knew that if things went well, they would hear about it sooner or later. Still, I wanted them to see it with their own eyes, to stand in the same room as the people who would judge the painting so differently from how they had. I called Chloe one afternoon when I knew she would likely be at home. She answered with the gentle background sounds of Zoey in the room. I told her that the gallery had included Pathways at Dusk in a winter auction at the Regional Arts Center. I explained in simple terms how the evening would work. I said that there would be a preview and then bidding, and that some of my students' pieces would also be on display in a side exhibition. She sounded surprised at first, then impressed in a cautious way. She said that it sounded like a nice event and that it might be good content for her social media if the place looked polished. Ethan, she said, might enjoy networking with the kind of people who went to art events. She asked if I really wanted them there or if I felt it would be too much pressure. I told her that I would like them to come, that it would mean something to share the evening with them. That was true, even with everything that had happened. I did not tell her about the estimate or the interest Nadia had hinted at. I kept my voice even, almost casual. Chloe said they would check their schedule, but that it was likely they could attend. She added that her in-laws liked cultural events and might come as well. I said that everyone would be welcome. Before we ended the call, she told me she was proud that my work was getting attention. The word proud sounded thin, as if she were trying it on, but it was there. A few days before the auction, Nadia sent me a more detailed schedule by email. She wrote that the preview would start in the early evening, with the main hall opening shortly after. She mentioned that a couple of collectors had already asked specifically to see my painting during the preview. She reminded me to arrive early if I wanted a quiet moment with the piece before the crowd built up. I printed the schedule and pinned it to the wall near my calendar. The red circle around the date stood out. Beneath it, I taped a small envelope with my name on it. Inside were a few things I had prepared. Printed copies of the catalog page with my painting, a clean list of notes about the trust changes, and a short, simple letter to myself. The letter said only that I was allowed to stand by my work and my choices, no matter who did or did not like them. The night before the auction, I did not sleep much. I lay in bed listening to the quiet, my mind rolling over small details. What tie to wear? Whether to bring my old sketchbook? Where I should stand during the preview? Whenever I felt my thoughts drifting into worry, I reminded myself that the outcome was not fully in my hands. My job was to show up, to stand there, and to let the systems I had chosen do what they were designed to do. On the day of the event, I dressed more carefully than usual. I chose a dark jacket and a simple tie that did not shout for attention. I slipped the small envelope from the wall into my inner pocket along with my phone. I stood in front of the mirror for a second. I did not see someone glamorous or grand. I saw a man who had drawn a lot of lines and carried a lot of boxes and sat through a lot of quiet evenings. It would have to be enough. I arrived at the Regional Arts Center early, as Nadia had suggested. The building rose from the street in clean lines of glass and stone. Inside, the lobby buzzed with staff moving around, carrying stands and adjusting lights. Nadia met me near the information desk. She said the hall looked beautiful and that the team had hung my painting in a strong position. We walked through the preview area together. The walls were lined with works, photographs, paintings, mixed pieces. People in suits and dresses moved slowly from one to another, though the room was not yet full. When we reached my painting, I stopped. On this wall, under these lights, Pathways at Dusk looked both familiar and new. A small metal plate beside it held my name and the title. The colors played differently against the neutral gray surface. I watched a middle-aged couple pause in front of it. The woman leaned in, tracing shapes in the air with her finger. The man nodded, saying something I could not hear. They did not know I was standing a short distance away. That made their reaction feel even more honest. Nadia told me quietly that she had already heard people mention the piece by title, that there were a few marked catalog pages with my number circled. She said that whatever happened later, my work had already joined the conversation in the room. That was more than most pieces ever received. I thanked her and continued walking. I saw a few of my students' works in a side area, labeled as part of a youth exhibition. That made me smile. It reminded me that no matter what happened with bids and numbers, there were always young hands learning to shape lines into meaning. As the hour moved closer to the main event, more guests arrived. The sound level rose. Soft footsteps, rustle of clothing, polite greetings, and low talk about estimates and favorites. Staff members began to guide people toward the hall where the auction would take place. I checked my watch, then I checked my phone. There was a message from Chloe saying that they were on their way and that they might be a few minutes late due to traffic. She added a small photo of Zoey in a neat dress, sitting in her car seat, holding a little stuffed animal. I saved the photo without thinking. I waited near the entrance of the hall. Through the open doors, I could see rows of seats facing a raised platform with a podium and a large screen behind it. Staff moved around, testing microphones and screens. Numbers and images flashed briefly, then vanished. It felt like standing backstage at a small theater. A few minutes later, I saw them, Chloe and Ethan walking in, followed by Victor and Sandra. They were dressed for an evening out, coats neatly draped over their arms. Chloe waved when she saw me and hurried over, giving me a quick hug. She said the place looked impressive and that she had already filmed a short video in the lobby for her followers. Ethan looked around with interest, saying that the room had a good energy for networking. Victor glanced at the program in his hand and commented that the estimates were higher than he expected for some pieces. Sandra smiled and said it was always nice to support culture. None of them yet knew which lot number belonged to me. The night still sat in front of us like a blank page. We went into the hall together and found seats a few rows from the front. Around us, people settled in, rustling papers and adjusting their jackets. Staff walked along the aisles, reminding everyone to switch their phones to silent, though many still held them in their hands, ready to film moments they thought might impress someone later. I felt the small envelope in my inner pocket as I sat down. It pressed lightly against my chest, a quiet reminder of the decisions already made. The screen at the front showed the auction house logo. The podium stood empty, waiting. Then one of the staff members stepped up to the microphone to test it. The speakers answered with a soft hum that ran through the room like a single low note, and the hall slowly settled into silence. The auctioneer stepped up, the logo vanished, and lot numbers began to spin past. When my painting appeared on the screen, I heard Chloe's soft intake of breath beside me. The opening bid landed, then another, then a rush. Paddles rose, numbers climbed, and the room focused. When the hammer fell at 100,000, there was a warm wave of applause. In the lobby afterward, Harold met us with a folder. He calmly explained that the recorded rejection and messages had triggered the new terms. Proceeds and future rights into a trust for Zoey and a scholarship, not for Chloe.